Hello, my name's Ed Poole. I'm a member of the Green Party, and today I'm interviewing Zoë Garbett, who's running to be Mayor of Hackney, and Dylan Law, who's running to be Deputy Mayor of Hackney. Hi, both of you. Could you tell us a bit about yourselves and why you're running?
Yeah, thanks, Ed, and thanks for covering this really exciting election. So I'm Zoe. I'm a Green Party councillor in Dalston Ward. I'm also a Green member of the London Assembly. So that's 25 people who hold the Mayor of London to account. I lead on policing, housing and planning. And yeah, I'm just really excited about this election and especially running with Dylan and just this moment for the Green Party. We've got a really historic chance to get a Green mayor elected in Hackney. I got 25% of the vote last time. And yeah, it's just feeling like a real moment for us. I feel like I can bring all of my experience of working in the NHS and councils for over 10 years, where I worked alongside residents to redesign services, manage big budgets. And yeah, I just think my learning from being in Hackney, being a London Assembly member, just means that this is a real moment for the party and for me to step up and become the Mayor of Hackney.
My name is Dylan. I'm 19. I lived in Hackney my whole life, and I'm running for the deputy mayor candidacy for the Greens as well. And yeah, like Zoe said, I think there's a very good chance of us winning. I mean, if you told us 5 years ago that the Green Party would overpass Conservative membership, they would call you crazy. But here we are, how the tables are turned. So, in my personal life, I'm always chill with my friends. I do some action days here and there. I talk to different community groups with Zoe as well. And I really do believe that we can represent our people more accurately than the current council does. So that's the aim.
In a lot of areas, the local mayor is a kind of ceremonial role without really much power. What's the situation in Hackney? How's it different?
So, in 5 boroughs in London, the residents elect a mayor directly at the same time as they elect their councillors. So, on the 7th of May this year, Hackney residents get one ballot for their councillors and one ballot for the mayor. And that means that it's a mayor directly elected by residents who holds the executive power of the council. We actually think it's a role that's got way too much power, and we would like to see it kind of dissolved and that power shared out. Very kind of Green Party values are devolving the power as close to the people. But while we've got this structure, the directly elected mayor selects a cabinet. And obviously, I'm running on a platform with Dylan and would select him as my deputy. And then that cabinet makes decisions. So it's an executive power. So is in charge of everything councils deliver, from social care to education to housing, climate policies, and everything in between. So it's a real opportunity to deliver and embed a green vision for Hackney.
Why should people vote for the Green Party?
Look, we're the only party that actually doesn't pretend that things are fine, right? You have a large amount of people, and especially in the borough as well, you have a large amount of people living in unaffordable homes. You have a large amount of people living in conditions which I don't think are even remotely sustainable. And I personally believe that other parties pretend it's not fine. They scapegoat issues like immigration. Before immigration, it was benefit scroungers. Before benefit scroungers, it will be Muslims. They even go far back when it was Irish people, right? But the point I'm trying to say is we don't do that, right? We provide solutions. We say that we think public transport should be free. We think that we should legalize certain drugs, and we also think that we should provide housing to a decent matter, which I think is a pretty basic thing to say. But yeah, no, I think that's the main reason. And on top of that, the reason why I personally joined is because of the people, right? I walked into the council. I didn't think I was allowed in the council beforehand, but I walked into the council. The people who used to patronize me were Labour. The people who were nice to me were Green. And it was a pretty clear-cut decision why I joined. So I joined Green, right? But that's just my personal experience.
I'll just add to that, really powerful experience from Dylan about kind of how politics feels. And I just think at the moment, the Green Party is going from strength to strength. We've got, in the last election, I got 25% of the vote. We're really putting out our bold policies. I think people are seeing more and more of Zach Polanski as our leader and feeling really kind of hopeful about what we can deliver. And in Hackney, we've been working so hard as Green councillors, working across issues like showing global solidarity with the people in Palestine, getting the council to divest, really pushing for these policies that really matter to people in this moment, addressing inequality at its core, delivering those policies that are for people and planet, and just really giving that hopeful different vision like Dylan described. We're really honest with people. We also really want to have a proper different relationship with residents, like really opening up the town hall so that people feel really welcome and included, but we're also being really transparent in that information that's going out, so people know things, they know times are difficult and they can see, Hackney changing, but let's include them in those decisions. So I just think it's a really exciting time for people to kind of get involved in the party or to vote for us.
Sorry, one area you've done a lot of work in is on decriminalising drugs. This is a very personal issue to me. I'm an alcoholic. I've been sober for 6 years, but also 11 years ago, my oldest brother Tom lost his battle with alcoholism and sadly died. Pentobarbital consumption is listed as one of the possible causes of death on his autopsy. This is a drug used in euthanasia I think in Scandinavia, but also in lower doses, it's used by alcoholics to control their symptoms. As far as I'm aware, he got it over the internet. Prescription drugs can be obtained illegally over the internet, obviously. If we're decriminalising drugs, how do we improve management of addicts, not just of illegal drugs, but of drugs already legal for recreational or for prescription?
I really want to thank you, Ed, for bringing this up and sharing your personal experience. It's just really heartbreaking to hear about your brother, but also just solidarity with you for your fight and your strength. I think the more we have conversations about people's lived experience of our current drug laws and of the kind of stigma around people who use any drug problematically and are struggling to find that help that they need, I think is really important. With my background in the NHS, but also just seeing our kind of current drug laws and what they've done to our communities and to people, I rewrote the Green Party's drug policy back in 2019, which is to legalise and regulate all drugs and have a serious conversation about the harm that drugs are doing to individuals if they can't access the drugs that they need, or if they're able to access other drugs in other ways, kind of illegally. But also to make sure that we're properly investing in that support. And I think that does come from challenging stigma, but also making sure that those routes of support are there for people. And we know that people's drug use is usually symptomatic of other stuff that's going on in their lives anyway. A lot of our policies are around kind of, housing, tackling domestic violence, making sure that people are, got proper access to mental health services. So it's kind of how the drug policy also sits with all those other policies that we've got as a party. But yeah, I think that the way that we've regulated alcohol isn't right, because I think a lot of the time when people hear us say that we want to legally regulate drugs, we just want to open up shops so people can access everything, which is completely not what we're saying. We've got an out of control drug market currently, and it's about that regulation. And it's about looking at, we don't agree with profiteering from drug use. So we don't think that corporates should be able to advertise in the way that kind of alcohol and tobacco companies do, and really want to take that public health approach. So yeah, I think it's really about having that honest conversation and going back to something Dylan was saying earlier, like just being really frank about where we are and being able to have those compassionate discussions and just deliver better solutions for people.
Why would I want to prosecute people who take drugs? Right? It makes absolutely zero sense whatsoever. It's a stupid standpoint, right? A lot of these people have taken drugs from prescription. A lot of these people have taken drugs from easy access, or because they've taken it before, or because they're peer pressured to take it. All of those four situations are situations where drugs are already a criminal offence. Why would I then prosecute someone who then takes those drugs under the current system? It makes no sense. What I'd rather do is having someone's child taken a crack alley, right, from someone who they don't fucking know, sorry to swear, but someone who they don't know in a dirty condition. I'd rather them take in a hospital with trained mental health staff. Right, it's a very clear-cut option. It's not a criminal offence. It should be a medical issue. Do you know what I'm saying? There's certain things, and there are some criminal offences. For someone who sells drugs, that's completely different, right? But for someone who takes it, someone who's been on, let's say, 5, 7, 10 years, that makes no sense to prosecute these individuals. What do I get out of it? Right? It financially makes no sense because you have to pay for these people to be in prison, and also socially it makes no sense because what good does it do? A lot of these people are good people, right? They're genuinely good people. What they really need is help, medical help. Not to be in a bloody prison cell, right? And the last time I checked, no one chooses to be addicted. Do you know what I'm saying? No one wakes up and says, do you know what I really want to do? I want to become a crack addict, right? That's not how it works. A lot of these people want to get off the drugs they're on, right? And what they really want to be able to do is go to the hospital and say, I had this and this issue without losing their job, which a lot of people can't do, right? I really honestly believe it's a very clear-cut issue. I know people who take drugs in my personal life, and I know a lot of them are functional, and they can't go and get the help they need because they're scared and because there's no transparency on how it currently works. What there should be is the Prime Minister come out tomorrow and say this and this and this is a medical issue, not a criminal offence. Get the help you need. And I think economically as well, even if you don't care about people, you don't give two fucks about people, economically in the wrong run, I think that's going to be very beneficial as well, if for productivity, but let alone the social benefits. But yeah.
And I think what you say there, Dylan, is really powerful. Like, I've worked a lot with the organisation Anyone's Child, which is incredible, that works with friends and family who've lost people to our current drug laws because of the way people can or can't access drugs. And I've spoken to parents who have said that they, when their children have died from, say, heroin use, have said that they've often wondered if their friends didn't call the ambulance quick enough or didn't speak to an adult about their use because they were worried about it being illegal and the ramifications of that. And that's really bad. If we've got a system where children, young people, or people of any age are too worried about talking about an issue that they're struggling with and their drug use, and it stops them getting help, I think is a really terrible place to be in.
Local government funding has been gutted by 15 years of cuts. How can Greens in elected positions fight back against austerity?
Yeah, so the Green Party has been the only party consistently standing up against austerity and saying that there are other ways to raise the funds we need and to properly fund public service. So I came into working in councils in 2010 as a commissioner. But obviously, I spent most of my time decommissioning services and funding being taken out of local authorities. And I just think the state that we are in now, where we're shutting where youth services are being closed, libraries, workers aren't paying, getting paid the wages they deserve. I just think you can really see the impact of austerity now. So I think as part of the Greens in Hackney Council, we've always pushed back against any austerity measures and called for Hackney Council to be louder to the government, not just grateful for when we're given like slightly small little pots of extra funding. This year in the budget round, we were really trying to make residents' voices heard. And I think that's where there'd be a difference with a Green Mayor of Hackney, that we would be really shouting about how much of an impact an austerity budget is having on our residents. And I do think that leaders of councils need to be clubbing together more strongly to say how badly the situation is. We can't provide, you've got you've got councils looking at the definition of statutory to see where they can flex that now. Like, that is how bad it's getting. So, people who are should be eligible for statutory adult social care or statutory services. We really need to look at where we are. And we're meant to be, one of the richest countries in the world. We've got this widening inequality, and you've got Greens at a national level calling for a wealth tax, things like rent controls, because we know that £70 billion over the last 5 years transferred directly from the government to private landlords through housing benefits. People can't afford their rent. £70 billion over 5 years. We could be using that for a whole host of other services. So I think it is about being really angry about this and being that elected voice to government, saying that it isn't okay and that there is money, we just need to make different choices.
Austerity is a shit sandwich. I'm going to keep apologizing for swearing, but it honestly is. And if someone shackles you to a chair and forces you to eat a shit sandwich, you might as well start shouting, right? Like, people want you to be as angry as they are. So then do it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if you're going to force me to do this thing that I don't want to do, like cut youth services, I'm just going to start making an issue out of it, right? Whether it's on a podium, whether it's on a video, just get me, like, whether it gets millions of views or a couple 100,000 views, that's just my full-time job now. Make their lives hell, right? And even if I have to cut all the services in the world, at least I really hated it. At least your life was a little bit harder. And I think that's just your main job, right? But if you don't have to do it, then obviously you don't. But the idea that you can sit in your little quiet room, make decisions about what Zoe was saying about flexing decisions, cutting services here, then trying to patronize residents and saying you had to do it, that's just it's spineless. No spinal cord, right? You know what I mean? Like, no one's invincible. No one can do things forever without being forced to do it. I understand that. But the idea of real bravery is at least fighting back, right? At least fighting back until you no longer can. Do you get what I mean? Like, if a council leader gets literally forced to do something or they lose their position, right? That's one thing. But folding over and then being quiet about it, that's just, it's honestly spineless, I think it is. Yeah.
I mean, the other thing we speak about a lot, Dylan and I, is about how people are involved in these decisions. Like, we're being honest with residents. We're not saying that elect a Green Mayor of Hackney and everything will miraculously be okay. Like, residents know how difficult things are, but I think it's having those honest conversations. Like we've seen primary schools close in a way that's been really disrespectful to the parents and the young people and the staff who go to those schools, because they knew that those school roles were falling, and they could have had a completely different conversation with residents, perhaps me making the same decision, but at least it feeling like it was something that was made together. So we really talk about how we'd involve residents more, like things like Hackney Council Cup, the carnival, and they did it in a really underhand way, and it was all hidden in a document, so no one could really know what it was, what the decision was. So then how do you challenge that? How's that honest? How are you finding different solutions together? And how are people feeling like you're kind of one borough that's making these decisions and kind of prioritizing together? So I think it's about how we make decisions as well.
How would you tackle the housing crisis in Hackney?
Yeah, so this is the biggest issue that comes up on the doorstep. And I think the fact that we've been in a housing crisis for years and years, and the only solutions coming from government are the same solutions that got into it, is absolutely infuriating. And I think about the housing crisis and how people experience it in three ways. There's kind of repairs and how damp and mouldy and creaking our kind of council stock is, and how people are experiencing that every day. You've got unaffordability. So how expensive it is to rent, or how lease service charges are going up for leaseholders. And then you've got what's being built, where it's built, and who that's for. And I think on every one of these accounts, we want to take bolder action locally and want to be louder to government on what the solutions are. I think it's terrifying that we are in a situation where the Mayor of London it's leaks that he's going to reduce the amount of affordable homes that are going to be built in any development, so from 35 to 20%. And I just think that's shocking that we're getting to a point where we're not standing up to developers to deliver those council homes, and we're not considering rent controls alongside that at a government level. But also on a local level, we know that Hackney Council has failed to deliver the repairs that residents need, and have got a bit of a positivity bias about how things are going, and they haven't been delivering those services or treating people with that respect. So we know there's a lot to do to deliver those basic repairs and to improve that for residents as part of the housing crisis, but to also call for those other solutions, and to make sure that we're delivering as much council homes as possible, and also acquiring those homes back, so that, taking those homes off the market is something that we champion in City Hall, that my predecessor, Charm Berry, spoke a lot about to the mayor, and that I've carried on, like making sure that we're buying back those homes and bringing them into use, and also challenging estate regeneration that doesn't deliver the homes we need. I also do a lot on accessible homes, so making sure that we're delivering as many accessible homes as possible, because disabled residents are experiencing the housing crisis on a whole nother level of sometimes not being able to access rooms in their homes. So there's a whole number of things that we do differently, either delivering locally or being that loud voice to government.
So yeah, my position would be slightly different, as what I could do apart from supporting Zoe would be I'd have a cabinet position. So for example, if I was, let's say, the cabinet member for housing, what I could do is obviously advocate for those who are already in housing right now. But I think the biggest issue is what people currently live in, right? I think the biggest issue is people have leaking homes, people have mold on their walls, people will not have kitchen appliances. I mean, actual kitchen cupboards, for example, are completely functional. Even things like taps. A lot of people's gas don't work, and they don't bother to report it because they think that was going to help them. And then the worst part is people start doing repairs themselves and get injured, right? I think those kind of things you need to really speak out on. And if it's not the Hackney Council's homes, right? And if it's not, so let me be clear, right? I think Hackney Council have a big issue with the way they communicate with the residents, right? I think what they need to do is cut out all the patronisation, cut out all the lack of replies, and start actually being prompt with what they're saying. And if things are really fucked up, I think they should probably say that. Right? And if it's their fault, I think they should probably say that. And I think it's a lot better that they say it themselves, or we say it ourselves, right? Than the housing ombudsman say it on our behalf, right? Because one looks much better than the other. If it's a housing association, I think you need to speak up that one as well, right? If I control or do restriction of a borough, let's say, for example, the borough of Hackney, and people are taking the piss out of residents in my borough, it's my duty to report on it. And whatever method you choose to go about that, I think that's a plan you can work with your officers, whether you choose to go as far as suing the housing association. I'm not saying that'll be the first resort, right? But that's your duty. And it's your duty, regardless of the method, to get to a state where the housing quality is up to scratch. And obviously then on top of your own council homes. And then another thing, like Zoe said, was about the empty homes, right? There are a large amount of individuals who hoard homes in the borough. These homes are empty. There's a large amount of people in temporary accommodation who are technically homeless. How does that make sense? How can you have homeless people in an area where there's empty homes? So it's these kind of things, and there's a way you order things, there's a way you prioritize things, and the way you communicate residents, I think, is the way you go about fixing the housing issue. And something which is not really in my remit, but I could also help support Zoe, would also be the way that we build social homes as well. So rather than doing a £500 private development on Tesco, right, if for private flats, so luxury flats, maybe you make sure that 50% of those homes are social homes, right? Get some of the people already on the housing list into those homes which cost 600, 800, £1,000, rather than the private ones which cost £3 a month. But that's just my personal viewpoint.
How can Hackney help tackle the climate crisis?
Yeah, so tackling the climate crisis is at the heart of everything we do as Greens. Us on Hackney Council, so the Greens on Hackney Council have really pushed for more urgent action on that climate crisis. We've also pushed for things like high carbon adverts to be banned. We've been protecting trees. We've just done as much as we can through all the different mechanisms within the council to push for more urgent action on the climate crisis. And we want to see more and more happening from Hackney Council, and that more consistent action. So there are some things that Hackney Council have done well in terms of greening the borough, but we've seen that lack of consistency, especially around supporting the big new incinerator up in Enfield as part of the multi-borough agreement. And we think that isn't the solution to deal with our waste and our recycling, and there's much more that we can be doing to prevent the use of the incinerator, but also not enlarging it. We've been against that and are working alongside community members for a long time. So I also think it's just about embedding the climate crisis in all we do. Like, that's just how Greens think, you know, embedding it into, you know, we were just talking about repairing people's homes and making sure that their bills come down and they don't have to use their heating as much and they're not leaking out that, you know, the heat when they've got it. And just, you know, we've been pushing for more action across all roads in Hackney. So the council promised a main road strategy that wasn't delivered. And we've been really pushing for that action on clean air across the whole borough so that everyone benefits. So I think it's, as Greens, how we embed thinking about the climate through all that we do.
It's not that we just care about the environment, it's the fact that we care about people. You're not going to find a single person on earth who cares about people really, really much and genuinely, who also doesn't care about the environment, because that does affect the individuals who live there, right? And it's not just 2100, it'll be in the next 10 years. It may be pollution, it may be their bills are going up, it may be that the cost of living is now unstable, it's completely unstable, and they're finding that they can't afford basic amenities, right? These are things that happen over a long period of time, which you don't notice in a 1 or 2 day period. So as a council, I think, as Zoe said, it's our responsibility to think about the long term, where an individual may not, and actually embed those kind of things in our policies. But yeah.
We've got hate crimes on the rise. We've seen a few horrific attacks in the last few weeks. What do we do to help bring Hackney's communities together?
Hate crimes based on race only stem from uneducation, right? They honestly only do. Me and you and everyone else in this call have more in common than we don't. It's honestly true. We have more in common than we don't, right? A man in my tax bracket has infinitely times more in common than me than any man of my race. Someone who is Muslim, someone who's Jewish, someone who's white. If we earn the same amount, we have 10 times more in common than any billionaire who may be of my race who's black, right? We honestly do. And I think when someone actually understands that for the first time, they actually realize, wait a minute, that Muslim man down the street, or this black man down the street, or that white woman down the street, they're not the real issues. It's the people who are raising my rent, they're the real issues. It's the people who are raising my water bills that are the real issues. It's the people who are home my kids to school, they're the real issues, right? And when people start to clock that and blame the actual things, the economic issues, rather than the easy option, which is blaming a race, things that you can see straight away on the color of your skin, I think that's actually where you start seeing real progress. But you actually have to understand, a lot of these people are good people, right? A lot of these people who spew racism, people who spew racism to me and my friends, they are good people underneath fundamentally, but they need educating, right? No one's born an evil man. You learn it, right? And a lot of these times, these points they're top down. They're points that are spewed by billionaires to keep us fighting amongst ourselves rather than fighting upwards. Because they know if we fight upwards, their positions no longer exist. They're not sustainable if you actually understand what we're talking about.
So I know that there's many residents in Hackney that are feeling pretty terrified right now. And I think it's the role of a leader of a council to be completely showing solidarity with everyone in Hackney and making sure that we're really boldly leading as leaders to make sure that we're not tolerating hate and that people feel as safe as they can be. I think we've been really clear in working with all communities across Hackney as Green councillors. We've often met with community leaders from all different faith backgrounds and community leaders of no religions. And I think it's just making sure that we're listening, building those, building across those divisions, and not just going for kind of, you know, working alongside the enforcement solutions, but making sure that we're really drilling down into what is dividing communities. A lot of the time that's bringing people together. I've got a lot of division in my borough, my ward at the moment, around people who have a culture of street drinking and people who find that culture too loud. And I think it's just really working on those solutions about how you can live in harmony, and how learning from each other about our different cultures and learning about kind of how we respect and live alongside each other. So I do think it's a whole combination of listening, bringing together, challenging, being that loud voice against hate, and being a positive, collaborative leader.
What other issues do you think locally are important in this election?
So we've talked about housing, which is one of the main issues that comes up on the doorstep. And I would like to talk a bit about the way the genocide in Gaza is playing out for residents in Hackney. Residents in Hackney care passionately about their elected representatives doing everything we can to cut our ties with the genocide in Gaza. Residents camped outside the town hall last year. That you've got residents coming together, forming Hackney Votes for Palestine, to make sure that people know about how the Labour Council and the Labour government have continued to show complicity with the genocide, and wanting to let them know that they've got alternative representatives, so in the Greens and Independents. But I think it really does resonate with residents here. I've spoken to people who are Palestinian who live in Hackney, and residents who show solidarity with Palestine. And it is a hugely important issue for people to know that we are cutting our complicity through our pension funds and cutting the twinning with Haifa, which is a military port in Israel, and just making sure that we know that we're doing as much as possible. And I'm so proud of the solidarity that Hackney residents have shown with relentless marches, joining the national and local ones. But I do think that having the most ethical council possible, like I've worked in the NHS and looked at kind of procurement contracts, and making sure that you are being as ethical as possible, and also keeping that kind of wealth local. And these things are really important in times of austerity, as we've spoken about. Planning and procurement powers are the strongest powers that councils have got to deliver what is needed locally, and using those to our advantage and to deliver the most ethical council that's delivering services for those in Hackney, but also showing that global solidarity, I think is really essential.
Gentrification, in the sense that we're seeing it now, is cleansing. It is a cleansing of a people who have lived there for a very long time. The idea that you can build an amount of luxury flats in the area where people have lived there in social rents for 20, 30 years is wrong, right? Because what will happen and what will follow is, if you raise a rent to £3,000, the shops will move in to adjust those prices to the rent that is £3,000. Those people on a rent of £600 who've lived for 20 years, they can't afford that. They can't afford that. What do they do next? If you knock down their Tesco that they shop at, which they're currently doing right now, where do they go next? They have to move out. You've cleansed them from their own area, right? And I really do feel passionate about gentrification. And I really do need the people to understand that me and Zoe have a complete stance against it, right? We need to stand up for our residents and stand up for people who can't afford to live in the borough if it keeps up at its current rate. And also, I think we need them to understand that we will stop it.
And I think that really plays out in the work that I do working with market traders, who've really felt this over the decades of feeling like all the bits around them that makes their work, makes trading possible. These markets are like such an important part of our social and cultural fabric, of our heritage, as well as of our everyday, providing low cost fruit and veg and like culturally important fabrics and foods. And they are really showing the impact of gentrification, whether that's from expensive flats displacing people, as Dylan described, who can't then shop and work in the markets, whether it's people being forced out because of the land and how expensive, how people want to build on the lands that market sits. And I think showing that solidarity is also a highly racialized issue. You know, you've got market traders across London being displaced, and it's mainly, I was at Elephant and Castle recently, and you've got 4 women of global majority that have been evicted from their trading spots because they're handing down historic electricity bills. And you're seeing that across the city. And I just think standing up and showing solidarity and calling out what this is, as Dylan just described, this being gentrification and displacement, I think is a real important issue for us to be loud about.
Absolutely. I grew up in Tottenham, and one of the main reason I don't live in London anymore is because we can't afford a house in Tottenham. Like, I've got, a pretty decent job. My wife's got a pretty decent job. Just can't afford to live in what my dad was a postman and my mum was an English teacher. They could afford a 3-bedroom house in Tottenham. No, we've got no child. We've got no kids. We couldn't afford that now. No chance. So yeah, it's
really sad. Like, with all the primary schools closing, it really does terrify me when you look across London about who's going to be able to live here and be here. It's just, I think it's terrifying. And it comes back to everything we've just been talking about in terms of challenging inequality, what's built, the impact that has on areas, and being loud about that.
What do you love about Hackney?
I think the best thing that come out of Hackney is probably the carnival. I do like the carnival quite a bit. Unfortunately, the funding was cut by Hackney Council, but before it was cut, I really did enjoy it. I really did, and I think it was a time where a lot of people were together. There wasn't much division, and it was togetherness. And also, on top of that, I think we have a real rejection of snobbery. Right? I've noticed. I don't know if it exists everywhere else, but I know for the Hackney people, for the average individual, we don't particularly like snobs. Right? I don't mean working. I don't mean working in the middle class. I think we both agree, working in middle class individuals agree that snobbery and elitism is not particularly tolerated, and that's why our stances against things like gentrification is so high. But yeah, I think that's our best traits.
I love that. And I think that links to what I love, which is I love our community groups, our community action, and how fiercely Hackney residents stand up for the things they love locally or the things they see that are unjust nationally or globally. Often I feel like the council has erased these community groups from history, be that Save Ridley Road in pushing them to take on the rent of the shopping village, or the Morning Lane People's Space, which we were at recently, and, kind of claiming that they just on their own thought to do some co-design work, when it's actually been residents who've been pushing for that and have pushed for more kind of council homes. And I've got real pride in that community action. It's something I really love about Hackney.
Great. How can people get involved in your campaign?
I think the easiest way for most people, as a large amount of Hackney's population is quite young and do use social media, I think the easier way to go on Instagram. Go to the Hackney Green Party page. That will show you all the information you need. You can go to, I'll say my page, and Zoe can say hers. Mine is Dylan M. Law on all social medias. So we both have TikTok accounts. We both have Instagram accounts. And we continuously update on what we're doing and what we're going to do.
I'm Zoe.Garbett on TikTok and Zoë Garbett Green on Instagram. And yeah, I'd love to see people coming out to door knock with us. It's a way that we really get to know voters, speak to residents on the doorstep, pick up casework, inform the policies we want to take forward, and just make sure that people know that there is this alternative. So there's lots of action days coming up that are all on the Hackney Greens website. Dylan's out in Hackney Downs, where he needs to be elected as a councillor to become the deputy mayor, and me in Dalston, and just, lots that's going on over the next few weeks. Just want to say a huge thanks to everyone who came out on our big day out, where we delivered 97,000 surveys in one day. 375 people came. We broke so many records that day, and we're looking forward to doing much, much more of that in the run up to the election.
What would you like to say to voters?
I want voters to know that there is an alternative, that we are providing bold politics, that we can give people hope, and that we will stand up against the things that we see as unjust, and we will deliver better services locally with you. I want people to just know how excited we are about the opportunity of being elected, and that there is a real opportunity to elect a Green mayor in May. We won by, we got 25% of the vote last time. I've been working so hard across the borough to deliver better services for residents, and just want them to know there's an alternative, and it's a real time to be getting involved in the Green movement.
I mean, for someone who's skeptical about voting Green, I'd say that it's plausible that we would win. The vote share is continuously going up. The opposition vote share is continuously going down. So it's not about whether we can win or not. But I'd say in terms of people who care about our values, we truly represent our people, right? Me and Zoe have very different experiences. We come from very different places, but we believe in the same things, and we are the same party. And there are a lot of individuals who come from different places who believe in the same things that we do currently. And that's because we truly, as I said, want to accurately and transparently represent our people and our communities. So if you want to be a part of it, then you vote for us.